Okay, buckle up, because today we're diving headfirst into some seriously weird territory. We're talking about the Ummo.
The Ummo, yeah.
Yeah, that group claiming to be extraterrestrial visitors who've been sending messages to Earth since, like, the 1950s.
Right, right.
We've got a ton of material to unpack here. Articles, transcripts, even some images. It's a lot.
It's a lot to unpack for sure. And they don't hold back. These messages are this wild mix of philosophy, social commentary, even really specific technical details that, and this is the really wild part, seem to predict future inventions.
It's like they knew what we were going to invent before we did.
Yeah, it's kind of creepy when you think about it. But we're getting ahead of ourselves. Let's start with the basics. Who are the Ummo? What do they want?
Right, the basics. So they claim to be from a planet also called Ummo, which is, get this, near the Starwolf 424.
Catchy name.
Right. And their story about how they found Earth is even weirder. So supposedly, a stray radio transmission from, get this, a Norwegian research vessel back in 1934 caught their attention.
An intergalactic wrong number.
Seriously.
Yeah.
And we thought getting spam calls was bad.
Exactly. But here's the thing. The Ummo story, it's not just a blip on the radar, right? It's not just some UFO sighting. It's decades worth of messages covering a huge range of topics. You've got everything from their thoughts on human society to super specific technical details. And through it all, there's this underlying theme. Like the Ummo, they seem to have this very specific interest in humanity. And, well, it's not necessarily a good thing.
Like they're watching us, just shaking their heads.
Yeah, kind of like we're heading for a train wreck in slow motion and they're just, I don't know, taking notes.
Okay, creepy. So let's say, hypothetically, these messages are real. Who is sending them? What do they look like?
Right. So they describe themselves as humanoid, looking very similar to someone you might find in, I don't know, Northern Europe.
Okay, so like your average Scandinavian tourist.
Basically. And they even mention having this thing called hyperdactylia.
Hyper what now?
Hyperdactylia. It's basically increased sensitivity in their fingertips.
Huh. I wonder if they're any good at, like, playing the piano or something.
Or picking locks.
Okay, true. But think about it. They could be living among us right now. We'd never know.
That's the thing, right? This ability to blend in, it's a recurring theme in a lot of extraterrestrial encounters. Imagine it. Beings living among us, observing our world up close. And get this, the Ummo, they claim to have this unique characteristic. Due to some physiological difference, they can only speak in whispers.
Whispers? Seriously?
Precisely.
That's got to make it tough to order a pizza, let alone deliver complex messages about, humanity's fate.
Right. I mean, imagine trying to warn someone about an impending apocalypse in a hushed tone.
Just a heads up. The world's ending, but keep it down. Okay.
Exactly. But on a serious note, there's something kind of, I don't know, poetic about it. Like, here are these beings, potentially with technology centuries ahead of our own, and they're forced to communicate in these hushed whispers. Makes you wonder about the logistics of it all.
Maybe they're just really considerate of noise complaints. We come in peace and silence.
Haha, right. But seriously, their early days on Earth, at least how they describe it, it's almost comical. They were reportedly fascinated by even the most basic technology. Like, there are these accounts of them stealing electricity meters just to figure out how they worked.
Okay, I'll admit that's kind of endearing. Alien tourists getting busted for stealing electricity meters.
Right. It's just this deep curiosity, this desire to understand even the most mundane aspects of a civilization that's not their own. What were they hoping to learn from an electricity meter? What were they thinking?
Maybe they were trying to figure out how we managed to make our energy grid so not complicated. Because let's face it, it's a mess.
Uh-huh. Maybe. But in all seriousness, they eventually moved beyond stealing electricity meters and started sending these messages. And that's where things get really interesting. We're talking about a mix of philosophical musings, technical specifications, and some pretty dire warnings about the future.
Okay, hold on. Back up a bit. Philosophical musings, technical what now?
Yeah, so the content of these messages is all over the place. You've got philosophical discussions about the nature of reality, really in-depth observations on human behavior, how we've structured our societies. It's kind of amazing, really. You wouldn't expect this from a civilization that's supposedly learned about us from, a random radio signal.
Okay, that's a good point, actually. But then you said technical something.
Oh, yeah. And then you've got these incredibly specific technical descriptions, and get this, in some cases they actually predate technologies that wouldn't appear on Earth for years, even decades.
Wait, so they weren't just sending us, like, intergalactic chain letters or something. Come on, spill the beans. Did they invent the internet? Did they give us the recipe for Coca-Cola?
I wish. No, no Coca-Cola secrets, unfortunately. But they did describe technologies that bear a striking resemblance to compact discs, fiber optics, even elements of virtual reality, and quantum computing, all way before these things became mainstream on Earth.
No way. Are you serious? That's insane. So we're not talking about vague predictions here. We're talking like detailed descriptions that match up with actual inventions.
That's the truly mind-blowing part. The Ummo, they often provided diagrams, even went into specific materials and processes that align surprisingly well with these technologies. Well, it's hard to explain. Of course, you have to acknowledge that correlation doesn't equal causation, right? Some people, they think this is all just a big coincidence or maybe misinterpretations, even hoaxes. But the sheer volume and specificity of these, well, predictions, as some people call them, it makes them really hard to just brush off.
That's wild. Okay, so maybe they have some kind of knack for knowing what's next in the tech world, which on the one hand, that's amazing. But on the other hand, it's a little creepy, right? Like, how do they know this stuff?
Right. It's a bit unsettling.
But they weren't just sending us the galactic version of patent applications, right? What about these warnings we keep hearing about? The whole doom and gloom thing.
Right, right. And that's where the Ummo story takes a bit of a darker turn. They express this, like, deep worry about the path humanity is on. They warn about a future filled with environmental devastation, social unrest, which, let's be honest, we're already seeing some of that.
Yeah, no kidding.
But the warning that they really hammered home, the one they emphasized the most strongly, is a complete and utter global economic collapse.
Okay, now that hits a little too close to home, even for aliens who communicate in whispers. I mean, seriously, an economic collapse.
I know, right? It's a common theme, though, in these kinds of stories.
So what do they say caused this whole meltdown? Is it climate change, political instability? Did they just see our global credit card bill?
All good guesses. But their explanation is much more, shall we say, unsettling. They claim that this collapse is not an accident waiting to happen. It's being engineered by design.
Wait, what? Engineered? Like on purpose?
That's what they say. They Ummo. They point to this powerful global elite that's pulling the strings behind the scenes. They say this elite, they're manipulating markets, hoarding resources, all with the goal of building a new world order from the ashes of the old.
Okay, hold on. A new world order orchestrated by a shadowy elite. It sounds like something out of like a really intense conspiracy theory documentary.
It does, doesn't it?
So how does this whole collapse thing go down, according to them? Like, do we all end up living in underground bunkers, fighting over scraps of food? Give me the details.
They paint a pretty bleak picture, not gonna lie. Imagine food shortages, social unrest that spirals into violence, a complete and utter breakdown of law and order. And get this, they even suggest that their own attempts to lessen the severity through what they call market manipulation can only do so much. They're basically saying even they can't stop it completely.
So not exactly a sunny outlook. Did they, like, give a timeline for this whole impending doom scenario? Should I be stocking up on canned goods?
They did, and it's one of the most debated aspects of their whole message. The Ummo, they identified a specific time frame, the period between 2019 and 2022, as having the highest probability of this economic collapse happening.
Hold on. 2019 to 2022. We're recording this in 2024. Did they, like, get their dates wrong? Miss a memo?
It's a fair question, and a lot of people are asking it. The Ummo themselves, they admitted that their predictions, they weren't guarantees. They were just potential outcomes based on their analysis of a bunch of different factors.
Okay, so they're not infallible. They can make mistakes. But still, 2021 came and went. No global economic meltdown. Does that mean they were wrong? Case closed.
It definitely makes things more complicated, that's for sure. But remember, they were adamant that these were possibilities, not prophecies. Maybe their interventions, the ones they talked about, maybe they had a bigger impact than they anticipated. Or who knows, maybe some other events shifted the timeline. We can't know for sure.
Okay, I guess that's fair. We can't hold them to a strict cosmic schedule.
Exactly. But it's also important to remember that a lot of the issues they warned about, things like the growing gap between the rich and the poor, the depletion of resources, the damage we're doing to the environment, those are still huge problems. Those haven't gone away.
It's true. We're not exactly living in paradise here. We've got our own fair share of problems. But let's say, just for the sake of argument, that there's some truth to their message, that this global meltdown, it's still a possibility.
Yeah.
What kind of advice do they give for navigating this whole thing? Like, what are we supposed to do?
Well, their advice is surprisingly practical. It's a mix of preparedness, community building, that sort of thing. They really emphasize the importance of having essential supplies.
Mm.
Food, water, medical necessities, the things you would need to get through a major disruption.
So, like, channel your inner doomsday prepper.
In a way, yes. But it's more than that. The Ummo, they also highlight the need for self-sufficiency, learning how to grow your own food, generate your own energy, even knowing basic first aid.
So it's not just about surviving. It's about rebirthing.
Exactly. And they're big on community. They really believe that coming together, not just as individuals, but as communities, is going to be absolutely vital for getting through the challenges they foresee.
So it's like a cosmic call for unity.
You could say that.
You know, it's interesting. For beings that can supposedly only speak in whispers, they paint a pretty vivid picture of what this whole collapse scenario could look like, and, more importantly, how we might actually survive it.
It's true. They're very detailed in their descriptions.
But it makes you wonder, if they're so advanced, why not just, fix it for us? Like,
Yeah.
beam down some futuristic technology, wave their magic space wands, and problem solved, right? Why all the cryptic messages and warnings?
It's the age-old question, isn't it? Why don't they just fix it for us? Well, the Ummo, they actually address this directly in their messages. They talk about this kind of cosmic non-interference principle. Basically, there are rules, agreements even, that govern how advanced civilizations are allowed to interact. And directly interfering with another civilization's development, especially in a way that overrides free will, that's a big no-no.
So kind of like galactic rules of engagement. Sorry, our prime directive prevents us from bailing you out of this mess, humans.
Exactly. They're basically saying, hey, we can offer you guidance, but ultimately you're responsible for your own destiny.
Tough love, Ummo style.
Yeah.
I appreciate that. So no magic wands, but they're happy to offer advice and warnings. But let's go back to the Ummo themselves for a second.
Yeah.
They sound almost too human to be true, physically speaking. Did they ever provide any, concrete evidence of their existence? Spaceship blueprints, alien selfies, maybe a welcome to Earth fruit basket with their planet's best snacks?
I haven't come across any fruit baskets, unfortunately. But seriously, the evidence, if you want to call it that, it's mostly circumstantial. We have the messages themselves, of course, hundreds of pages of carefully typed documents. Some of these have been analyzed, really intensely for their language. People are looking for unique vocabulary, grammar, anything that screams, hey, this wasn't written by a human.
Like an intergalactic game of spot the fake accent.
Uh-huh, kind of. And some of these analyses haven't really been conclusive, but there are others that point to these complexities that would be really, really difficult to fake, even for someone who's like a master linguist.
Okay, so we've got these messages, strange, detailed, but not exactly proof. What about physical evidence? Did they leave anything behind? A crashed spaceship? An alien library card? Anything?
There have been claims, of course. People talk about strange pieces of metal, weird symbols etched onto objects, that sort of thing. But most of this stuff is shrouded in secrecy, passed around in these small circles, never really subjected to any kind of rigorous scientific testing.
Sounds like a classic conspiracy theory setup.
It does, doesn't it? But to be fair to the Ummo, they were very insistent on keeping a low profile, like really low profile. The whole whispering thing wasn't a big enough clue.
Right, like, hey, we're aliens, but we really don't want to cause a scene.
Exactly. They were adamant about avoiding any kind of direct contact with governments or big organizations. Instead, they claim to have reached out to individuals, people from all walks of life. Scientists, engineers, artists, you name it. People they saw as open-minded, but also discreet enough to, prevent mass panic or unwanted attention.
So like their own little intergalactic pen pal program. But instead of friendship bracelets, they were sending dire warnings and cryptic clues about the future. But seriously, why all the secrecy? If they're legit, wouldn't going public have made a much bigger impact, get more people to pay attention?
You would think so, right? But they had their reasons. They argued that a sudden, massive reveal, it would lead to chaos and disbelief. People wouldn't be able to handle it. So instead, they opted for a slower, more gradual approach. Planting seeds, encouraging individuals to question, to investigate, and ultimately to come to their own conclusions.
Like a slow drip of cosmic truth.
Exactly.
I kind of see the logic there.
Yeah.
Even if it is a bit frustrating for those of us who prefer our alien encounters a little more Hollywood, shall we say.
Right. It's not every day you hear about aliens who prefer typewriters and whispers over flying saucers and lasers.
No kidding.
Yeah.
But let's be real for a second. For every person out there who's intrigued by the Ummo, there's probably 10 more who think it's all a load of hogwash.
Right. Absolutely. It's easy to dismiss it as fiction, wishful thinking, a hoax, whatever. And without that smoking gun, that undeniable proof, that doubt is always going to linger.
It's the age-old problem, isn't it? Extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence. But let's just say for a moment that the Ummo are exactly who they claim to be. What would that mean for us, for our place in the universe? It's a big question.
It's a huge question. I mean, it would mean that we're not alone, not just in this vastness of space, but potentially part of this incredibly complex network of civilizations all bound by these rules and agreements that we can barely even begin to fathom. It would challenge everything we thought we knew about ourselves, about our place in the grand scheme of things. Suddenly, we're not the most important thing in the universe. We're not even the only intelligent life form out there.
Yeah, that's a lot to process. I mean, it's kind of humbling in a
Okay.
way and a little terrifying. But even if the Ummo are, a product of our collective imagination, doesn't it say something that we're even asking these questions? That we're looking up at the stars and wondering if we're alone?
Absolutely. This desire to understand our place in the cosmos, it's deeply human. The Ummo story, whether it's true or not, it taps into that. It reminds us that even in a world that's obsessed with the here and now, there's a part of us that still craves mystery, that wants answers to the big questions.
And maybe, just maybe, by asking those questions, by wrestling with those mysteries, we open ourselves up to possibilities that we never even dared to dream of before.
Exactly.
It's funny, we're talking about this super advanced civilization zipping across the galaxy, but their communication style's pretty, old school. Typewriters, whispers, it's all very lo-fi. You'd think they'd have some high-tech ways to get in touch,
Yeah.
right? I don't know, maybe beam messages directly into our brains or something.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? I mean, it
Yeah.
does seem strange, right? Their communication methods, they seem strangely low-tech for a species that can travel between stars.
Right. Like, come on, guys, get with the times.
Exactly. But they did mention that their technology, it operates on principles that we don't fully understand. They even hinted that some of their communication, it might be happening on levels that we can't even perceive, like hidden within electromagnetic frequencies or natural phenomena, that sort of thing.
Whoa, whoa, whoa. Hold on. So you're saying we could be getting bombarded with Ummo messages right now and have absolutely no idea?
It's a possibility.
Okay, that's both really cool and kind of creepy.
I know, right? But it plays into this recurring theme in their messages, the limitations of our understanding. They're basically saying, hey, humans, you think you're so smart, but you've barely scratched the surface.
Okay, I'll admit, that's a humbling thought.
Right. Like, for all our advancements, we might be totally missing the point. Like, trying to understand a smartphone by, I don't know, licking it.
Or using it as a doorstop.
Exactly. We're just not equipped to even perceive what's really going on.
So you're saying there might be all this other stuff in their messages, maybe even the whole point of their message that's just going right over our heads.
It's a distinct possibility. And it kind of makes you think, doesn't it? How much are we missing just because we don't know how to look for it?
That's a good question. So you spent a lot of time with this Ummo material, more than I have, that's for sure. What stands out to you? Like, what's the most compelling reason to take them seriously? And on the flip side, what's the biggest red flag?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it?
Hmm.
Where to start? I think for me, the most compelling thing, the thing that makes me go, maybe there's something to this, is the consistency of their story. Over decades, they've presented this incredibly detailed, incredibly coherent narrative. Their origins, their technology, their observations of humanity, it all kind of hangs together.
Okay, so consistency is a big one. What about on the other side? Any moments where you thought, come on, Ummo, really?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, let's be real. The biggest challenge is the lack of verifiable physical evidence. There's no spaceship sitting in a museum somewhere, no confirmed DNA samples, no intergalactic ambassador stopping by for a photo op.
Yeah, that would be pretty convincing.
Right, so it's easy to dismiss it all, to say it's a hoax or wishful thinking or just a really, really good story. And without that smoking gun, that doubt is always going to be there.
It's the catch-22 of ufology, isn't it? Too good to be true, but not enough proof. But, okay, let's play devil's advocate for a second. Let's say, just for fun, that the Ummo are exactly who they say they are. What would that mean for us? For our place in the universe?
Yeah.
The big question.
It's a massive question. It would mean, well, first of all, that we are not alone. And not just in a, oh, there might be other planets out there kind of way, but in a, we are part of a much bigger picture, a complex network of civilizations, all bound by these rules and agreements that we can barely even fathom kind of way. It would change everything.
Wow, that's a lot to take in.
Right. It challenges everything we thought we knew about ourselves, about our place in the universe. Suddenly, we're not the most important thing in creation. We're not even the only intelligent life form out there.
It's kind of humbling when you think about it like that.
Yeah.
A little terrifying.
For sure. But even if the Ummo are, a product of our collective imagination, doesn't it say something that we're even asking these questions? That we look up at the stars and wonder if we're alone?
That's a really good point, actually. It's like this primal need to understand where we fit in, right?
Exactly. This desire to understand our place in the cosmos, it's deeply human. The Ummo story, true or not, it speaks to that yearning. It reminds us that even in a world that's increasingly focused on the immediate, on the here and now, there's a part of us that still craves mystery, that wants answers to those big questions.
And maybe, just maybe, by asking those questions, by actually engaging with these mysteries, we open ourselves up to possibilities that we never even considered before.
Absolutely.
It's interesting how the Ummo story, whether you buy into it or not, it really makes you think about humanity's place in the universe. It's a big concept to wrap your head around.
It really is. And you know what I find fascinating? One of the most fascinating aspects of the Ummo messages is how they connect those big cosmic ideas with very specific observations about human nature, about us.
Like what kinds of things? Give me an example.
Well, they talk a lot about our tendency towards conflict. They seem to see it as coming from this fear of scarcity, like a belief that there's just not enough to go around, which, let's face it, isn't totally off base when you look at history.
Yeah, we're not exactly known for our sharing.
Right. And they connect that to our competitive systems, to how we've structured our societies. They argue that it creates this cycle of conflict and inequality that's not sustainable in the long run.
So they're basically saying we're fighting over scraps when we should be figuring out how to share the pie.
That's a good way to put it. It's almost like they're looking at our economic and political systems from this anthropological point of view, like scientists studying the behavior of a particularly volatile species.
That's a scary thought. We're the lab rats. But it does make you wonder, what would a society that wasn't built on scarcity and competition even look like? Could we even imagine such a thing?
That's the question the Ummo seem to be asking us to consider. They suggest that a truly advanced civilization, a truly evolved civilization, would be one that operates on principles of abundance and cooperation, one that recognizes that we're all interconnected.
Okay, that's a beautiful thought and everything, but let's be real. It's a pretty radical idea, especially in a world where we're constantly bombarded with these messages of scarcity. Not enough time, not enough money, not enough resources. It's like we're hardwired for this.
It's true, we're conditioned to think that way. But the Ummo, they seem to believe that this shift in perspective, this shift in consciousness, it's not just some hippie ideal, it's essential for our long-term survival as a species.
So it's like a wake-up call, a cosmic reality check.
Exactly. They're saying, hey, humans, this is the path you're on and it's not sustainable, but here's another way.
So their message is kind of a paradox then. It's both a warning about the dangers of our current path and this invitation to imagine something totally different, a future where humanity embraces cooperation and abundance.
Exactly. They're not just pointing out problems, they're offering a potential solution, a different way of being in the world.
That's a lot to unpack. But I think that's what makes the Ummo story so fascinating, whether you believe it or not. It forces us to step outside of our own limited perspectives and grapple with some really big questions about ourselves, about our place in the universe, about the kind of future we want to create.
You said it. I couldn't agree more. The Ummo story is a powerful reminder that sometimes the most important journeys are the ones that take us beyond the boundaries of what we think we know.
Well said. And on that note, we'll have to leave it there for today. It's been an incredible journey exploring the world of the Ummo, from those cryptic messages to their warnings about the future, whether you're leaning towards I believe or this is totally bonkers. And Trench, we hope this deep dive has given you something to think about. Until next time, keep asking those big questions, and remember, the universe is full of mysteries waiting to be explored.